Let me hold this up for the camera, and that is, the headline reads here that Protein Sciences, right,
Yeah.
has been involved in the development of an Ebola vaccine.
Right.
Right, that's a big deal.
That is
So I got a
big
couple
deal.
of other headlines, but why don't you tell me a little bit about this?
Yeah, the Ebola vaccine, in principle, we are able to very rapidly, with our technology, make any kind of vaccine as long as we know what a protective antigen is. And in the case of Ebola, there were two items. We were a subcontractor about 4 years ago under a government contract that was looking in the light of, preparedness against whether it was biodefense or what have you, to develop an Ebola vaccine. So we developed the tools, we had the tools in-house to make an Ebola vaccine. And science had gone on, this project was put on hold because people decided that it was not a priority, etc. So we had the tools in-house to make that vaccine. At the same time, having the Flublok vaccine approved and having a universal production process that had been reviewed and evaluated by the FDA, a technology that I like to describe as a plug-and-play technology, we could just take that that tool that we had developed and put it in our production system. So we are making the Ebola protective protein because we know what your body needs, what kind of antibodies your body needs to make to protect yourself against Ebola. We had the genetic information that provides the instructions for cells to actually produce that protein. We had that tool in our hand, and we were able to plug and play that in our manufacturing system, and we're making the protein as we speak.
Okay.
And that protein will be transferred to the National Institute of Health by the end of the month, and they have lined up monkeys so that we can actually do experiments where we will vaccinate the monkeys, and then after these monkeys have received various vaccinations, these monkeys will receive a challenge. They will be inoculated with a lethal doses of Ebola virus. And if those monkeys survive, which is what one would expect based on the theory, right, based on what we know today, then there's a path forward for a vaccine.
Okay, so I've learned two things, and I'll ask you a further question about Ebola. Thing number one I learned is some of the things you said about Ebola. The other thing is, I think I understood you to say that with the Flublok,
Blocking the flu.
blocking the flu, right?
Yeah.
With the Flublok platform, from this platform already having been developed, you use the words, euphemism, plug and play, from the platform having been developed, you could actually, when you're faced with other challenges, use the platform itself.
Yeah.
Okay, the technology
As long
itself.
as the science is there to tell you what is the protective antigen. And for
Okay.
Ebola, we know that.
So how soon can you, let's say that the monkey test is successful, Mano.
Yeah.
So how soon can it get out to market?
So we have results of the monkey tests probably somewhere mid-February. At the same time, we can start human clinical studies to prove some safety in humans already before that. We could do that in January. And I think, dependent on how the Ebola disease evolves, that will determine how much risk agencies and the World Health Organizations are going to be willing to take. We could basically have material that could be used in humans ready by January.
January of 2016.
Of 2015.
15.
And the reason why I say this, the techniques and the technologies and the products that are being tested right now in humans are unproven technologies. And there are quite a few people that believe that those technologies could benefit from a protein boost. So in other words, from getting the product that
Which
we
is
are
your
making.
technology.
Yeah. So we are speaking with some of those big pharma companies to assess, and the World Health Organization to assess, okay, do you want to do this? Because again, this is all based on theory and experience in other diseases that make many scientists and medical experts believe that this would be a good path forward. So that's what we're working on behind the scenes.
Okay, so the other thing I heard you say a couple of minutes ago while you were editorializing was that there's really a couple of things with Ebola. One is a human can get it, and it's usually, I think, fatal 75% of the time. And the other thing was you essentially said that the other application here in the hands of certain people can become an instrument of bioterrorism.
Yeah, and I think that that is why we actually have the knowledge about Ebola that we do, because it was really the Department of Defense that has continued.
I don't know
to
whether or not
have
you
an
saw it or not,
interest.
but I saw on TV this morning, there was a special, like a little 2-minute segment about the Army research labs doing stuff with Ebola for the
Okay.
very reason you just mentioned, the
Right.
bioterrorist aspect
Yeah.
of it. Let me, couple of headlines. Got the camera ready here? Okay, so the first headline speaks to, I think it's a quarantine, right,
Right.
Mano?
Yeah.
And the second headline speaks to screenings at airports. And you just flew in from Europe this past Wednesday.
did.
So what happened?
So there were indeed 2 extra questions as you entered the country, and it relates to, have you been to one of the countries in West Africa where Ebola is active at this moment in time? And the second, have you been in contact with somebody who could possibly have Ebola?
And you
I guess
answered,
I was able to answer no.
No.
If you answer yes, you are at risk in this state to be put in quarantine, as we know.
right,
Yeah.
right. Okay, so the next headline was Ebola in U.S., fear but outbreak unlikely. And then there was another headline that I wanted to show Mano. It says, nothing to fear but panic itself.
All right.
And then the president weighed in and he said, beware of Ebola hysteria.
Right.
Okay, so we have progressed from screening to whatever to it may be hysteria. Let me go backwards. Do you think what happened was a little bit of United States news media hysteria that's set in here?
Well, I think what happened was really, really scary, honestly.
Scary.
Yes, because when I went to school, and this is quite a few years ago, what you learned about Ebola was that Ebola was such a lethal virus. You were referring to 75% case fatality rate, but I think we now believe that it's more like 50%.
Okay.
But the situation was the villages where these outbreaks occurred in West Africa and in Africa were so isolated that a whole village would die out, and there would maybe be 50 or 100 victims, and that was it. Village would be burned down, and that was how the disease was contained. But from a virology, biology perspective, this is a super dangerous virus. We call it a biologic safety containment level 4, which really means that if you want to work with this virus, you need to wear moon suits and you need
Everything
to
we saw on TV.
be super protected.
4 out of what? 4 out of 4? Mano,
I
or
think
4
it's
out of
4
5?
out, it's 4 out of 4.
So it's the highest you can get.
Yeah, so when the virus started spreading, and it has really spread substantially in West Africa, and when it appeared in America, I was like, okay, this is really scary, because it looks like the whole, all the assumptions that everybody always made about Ebola have changed. Case fatality rate is down, which means that the virus has more chance to spread and to go from person to person. And one of the infectious disease specialists of Hartford Hospital System said to me, it's because we're keeping these people alive now. We have medical doctors there. The disease actually made it into the cities where there's a lot of commerce. You have people traveling to America, to China, to India. And here in the United States, we have pretty good surveillance. So in other words, despite the fact that the hospital in Texas missed this, I don't think that it's strange that they missed it, honestly, even though there were all kind of CDC guidances out already, but nobody really believed that that disease could ever make it here, right? Because people would say, oh, you have to be so enormously sick, etc., before you could actually spread that virus. But the scary thing about Ebola is that during the first 9 days, you just think you have the flu. And then between day 9 and day 21, things can turn extraordinarily violent. So I guess when the first patient entered into the Texas hospital, the person had fever-like symptoms, but nobody thought much of it. Because guess what? You also have the flu, right? And therefore, it's maybe not so strange that they sent the patient home. It's obviously not good that they missed that the person came out of West Africa, but think about it, in the US, there's not so much news about the rest of the world. So I think that Europe was more prepared and better prepared on what was going on in Africa, and that it was not like 100 to 200 cases anymore, but that we were talking about thousands of cases.